I'm live. Good morning. It is Thursday. Oopsie. It's the 1st of June, 2023. And it's a sunny day. And I'm reading out of Winged Pharaoh, a book published in 1937 by Joan Grant. She was a writer of Far Memories. And this was a memory of hers which plays in the ancient Egypt 5,000 years after Atlantis went down, and it's before the flood and before Babylon. She is Sekita, the daughter of Pharaoh, and she is now co-ruling with her brother Nea after having done the ordeals which she successfully completed. Chapter 3 of Part 5, Pharaoh in Audience. Every night before I sat in audience, I sent out this call: Master, if tomorrow there be that before me, which of my own experience I cannot judge truly, may I be shown away from earth that which is necessary for my understanding, so that I can see the truth and the scales beneath which I sit remain a true symbol of justice. One morning on waking, I knew that I must judge between two women. One I should remember by the 5 gold bracelets that she would be wearing on her left arm. The other, who was the innocent one, would have a white scar shaped like an arrow head on her right temple. The throne in the hall of audience was made of gilded wood, and at its feet were lion pawed. When I sat alone in audience, I held the crook and the flail. When Nea and I were together, I held the golden lotus. On each of the room there was a table at which sat the scribes who kept the records of all judgments. With them were those who read out the history of the case that was to be heard. This custom had been introduced by Nea in the 5th year of his reign. Before then, every disputant had told his own story in his own time, and sometimes a man would talk for an hour and still leave his hearers with little knowledge of what he wished to say. So now to each one a scribe was allotted, who could put a long confused story into a few words. The first case read out to me was between the widow of a rich noble from Abidwa and a girl who had a child, but who was unmarried. The child's father, who had died before it was born, was the son of the rich widow, and she was claiming the right to take her grandson and bring him up in her own household, saying it was his proper home, for the child's mother was a prostitute and had no claim either on the child or on her charity. The mother of the child wished to keep it with her, saying that, having inherited a small farmland, she had the means to clothe it and feed it, and that she would bring the child up in accordance with the teachings of the light. I ordered the 2 women to be brought in. One woman was of about 45. She was over-richly dressed. Her mouth was bitter, her hands soft and fat, and on her left arm were 5 gold bracelets. The other, a young girl who wore a white tunic of coarse linen and a blue cloak, which was draped over her head and hid her hair, but I could see that there was a scar upon her temple. The noble's widow was plainly in awe of me, and was unsure of ceremony. I knew that she wished that she were at the palace for a festival, which she could attribute to her nobility, and not for justice, when we are all equal. Her face was not of pure race. Perhaps she was the daughter of some rich trader. By the shape of her nose she must have had a strain of Zuma blood. Her fat fingers were restless. She twisted her necklaces in her fingers, and her bracelets jingled on her arms. Yet she felt secure in her respectability and her riches, and had no fear of the claim of one whom she considered a prostitute. The girl stood very still, her arms hanging at her side. She had the proud carriage of women who are used to carrying jars upon their head. Her eyes never left my face. She was calm, for she knew that I should give true judgment, and that, knowing her heart, I should leave the child in her keeping. I spoke to the girl and asked, "Why did you have this child?" And she answered me, "Daughter of Horus, bearer of double wisdom, weigher of hearts and mirror of the truth, I loved his father, the husband of my heart. Yet I could not share his house as wife, for I have few possessions, and my husband's mother wished him to marry one of the noble blood, who could bring treasures to enrich his house. Although we could not be one before the priests, yet were our bodies joined on earth. And when we slept, we were fearless before the gods, and in our hearts we knew no shame. When he fell ill before our child was born, a servant told me that he often called for me, yet they would not let me see him, though I waited in the garden and spoke to his mother and begged her very humbly that I might go to see my beloved and comfort him. She saw that I was big with child and told me that I was a creature of the night, who by my presence made her garden fouler than a village midden. Yet, when her son died, leaving no other child, she had me spied upon until my child was born, then sent her servants to my house to try to take my son away from me. I asked her what she could give her son. He shall have food and shelter, sun and air, the river to bathe in, plants to grow, and animals to play with. And when he is older, he shall have a field to plough, and a cow to milk, and take to pasture. He shall learn the ways of boats, and how to cast a fishing net. I will teach him gentleness and truth, so that he may look in a mirror, and be unafraid of what his eyes read from his own eyes. And I will teach him to keep his body pure and strong, and that the greatest happiness on earth is to find another more beloved than oneself. And all that this girl said I knew was true, for I had heard it in my dream. Then I turned to the other woman and I asked her what she could give her grandson. She railed against the girl, saying that she was a liar and a prostitute, of whom her son had taken careless pleasure for an hour, and only from the kindness of her heart had she decided that in duty to her son she must protect his child from living with such a woman, and that, being of noble birth, she could not have her grandson ploughing a field and living like a servant. Then she said what riches would be his, orchards and vineyards, serving maids and gold, which, she being a widow, all belonged to her, and when she died would go to the child, whom she would make her heir. When she had finished, I waited a moment before I spoke. She was so sure I would decide in her favour. She did not realize that I saw her heart and knew its worth. Then I said to her, in your house the child would have all that he needed for the comfort of his body. He would have a gilded bed, but where would his spirit go to when he lay upon it? You have shown that you know nothing of how to assist the growth of the spirit of a child. You think that riches are more important than love, for you wish to give the child possessions, and yet take it from its mother. This shows that you are a fool. If you acknowledge the child as your grandson, then should his mother be as a daughter to you. But in your self-righteousness you look down upon the girl, thinking that she has sinned, and thereafter that your son has shared her sin. You should have done all that was in your power to compensate her for what your son has brought her to. But instead you wish to rob her of her child, and so you are a thief. You would drive your son's love from your door, so you are without compassion. Yet you, who are a thieving fool without compassion, dare to despise one who has known unselfish love for a man and for a child. This shows you have no wisdom and small experience. And lastly, you dare not go for judgment in your own city, for there they know that, but for your pride of position, the girl would have been the wife of your son. And so you brought your case to me, thinking that I, Pharaoh, would be deceived by you. This shows that, thief and fool, without compassion, having no knowledge or experience, you dare to hold your ruler in contempt, thinking to keep your petty truth from me. For this you should be whipped upon the feet. Instead, you shall give to the mother of your grandson that part of all your possessions which would have been hers if she had been your son's wife, before the priests, instead of only in her heart, and thus before the gods. As well as this, you shall give her 2 assloads of gold and 1 of silver. And when you see less food upon your table and fewer serving maids about your house, it may remind you that I am Pharaoh, and the truth. Then there was brought before me a man who was kinsman to the vizier of the land of the jackal. He was a rich noble called Shalnuk, and he had demanded the right of being heard by Pharaoh. He had diverted the water channels to his own vineyards, where he tried to grow 3 vines where one should have flourished. And the farmlands between the borders of his estate and the river dried up, and all the grain perished. When I found that he had done this, not of his ignorance, but because he thought that the little fields below him mattered not, and the hearts of the farmers were beyond the boundaries of his compassion, I gave judgment upon him. You have sinned, because you did not understand what it was that you did to others. In the green shade of your garden you forgot the sorrow of the parched fields. As understanding is the fruit of experience, and understanding is what you lack, you shall eat of the fruit that is unfamiliar to you. You shall live in the hut of a ploughman, and have a rich field and 2 oxen to draw your plough. Beside your new home there shall be a grain bin, 6 cubits high, and 3 cubits across the circle. When this is filled with the grain that you have reaped from your sowing, then shall your own lands be returned to you. But though in 3 months this bin could have been filled, for 3 years Shalnuk labored. When his grain began to gild the stalks, the plant spirits of the grain were pulled away, so that it rotted and fell unripened from the ear. Thus did he labor under the hot sun until his field was watered with the tears of his heart, and he shared the sorrow of all who had suffered because of him. Then, when hope had all but died in him, his corn ripened and the granary was filled, and once again the floors of his house heard the footsteps of their master. And now in the land of the jackal there is no kinder overlord to his people. That was chapter 3. Happy Thursday!